everybody. This is Steve Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion on the 7 heavenly virtues. Last time around we finished our talk on chastity, and we started to talk a bit about temperance. So that's what we're going to do today, pick up where we left off on temperance. So you should be seeing the 7 heavenly virtues on your screen. Is that the case?
Yep.
Good. At the end of last call, I gave you guys some homework, and I told you about this short animated film called Balance, and I suggested that you guys go and take a look at this video. Excellent video. If you haven't had the chance to see it, if you just go to YouTube and just do a little search for Balance animated short, something like that, you're going to see this come up pretty easily. And all it really is, it's a little stop animation. Is that what they call it? Stop motion animation, where they actually have puppets, and then they'll make a slight little change to the position of a puppet, and then they'll take a shot, and then they'll move it a little bit more and take a shot. So every bit of movement that you see is actually the result of literally hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of small little adjustments the filmmakers have made to the puppets, and then taking a little shot and stringing it all together. So tremendous amount of work. Well, for those of you who haven't seen it, Balance is basically where there is this platform suspended in air, and there is a group of these tall stick puppets, these guys. I think there might be 6 or so of them, and they have to stay in perfect balance on this platform, otherwise it starts tipping one way or another. And at a certain point in it, it's very short, it's a little short animated video, it's not long at all, they decide to pull out fishing poles, and someone pulls a trunk up onto the platform, and the weight of the trunk throws the platform off balance. So these guys are suddenly running off to a corner or whatever to try to bring this panel back into balance. And then the board starts moving and on and on and on. Well, by the time this video is over, you're actually watching all 7 of the deadly sins without a single syllable ever being spoken. But you're watching all these happen, and I won't give away the end of it. But the end of it talks about what you have to do to survive when life has gotten so far out of balance that achieving balance ends up a tremendous sacrifice. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that makes it very curious. But the reason why I want you guys to look at that is because temperance is the virtue we're looking at right now. And temperance in modern use is defined as moderation, voluntary self-control, self-restraint. So it's not about saying no to anything as much as it's about saying all things in moderation. A little bit is a good thing, too much of anything is a bad thing. And so if you take temperance to a deeper definition, a more classic sort of a definition, it will include things like holding yourself back from revenge on another person, holding yourself back from expressing your emotions too aggressively. So it's about nonviolence and forgiveness, restraint from arrogance, practicing a bit of humility, modesty, etc. Now, that all sounds very, very good. But as I said last time around, this idea about bringing things into balance is not about just 2 things in our life, like a teeter-totter. It really is like this platform I've described for balance. There's all kinds of things all around us in every aspect of life, and all kinds of people and all kinds of situations and issues and temptations and all that. We have to keep it all in balance. And so I think picturing the task of balance as being that disc or that platform balanced on top of a single point is a lot more useful than picturing a teeter-totter and having 2 things on either side of the scale or something like that. So that's why I want you to look at that. Any thoughts, comments about this idea that balance is far more dimensional than a simple teeter-totter? Yeah. Okay. Now, the second thing that I brought up last time around is about that generally when we read about temperance, what they seem to focus on are undesirable behaviors and holding back on those undesirable behaviors. And so they would say things like abstinence and not temperance, and um, um, I'm trying to think of a better word for it, but humility, that sort of stuff, that reducing those outwardly over the top sort of behaviors, that's really good. But I think balance also requires people who are currently under expressing themselves to express themselves more powerfully. People that are currently in the position of being the underdog, the victimized, the whatever, need to become a bit more assertive in order to find balance for them. And so I get it. It's very obvious when you look at those um, more aggressive sorts of behaviors. That I think we can all see. But how many of us have clients who really have the opposite problem? We're not trying to tell them to hold back. We're trying to encourage them to step up and step out and take a chance and express themselves and have an opinion, and etc. Thoughts about that, anyone? It's a quiet group today.
I
So, yeah. And so, well, like for example, David, I'll put you a little bit on the spot. You're a dad. You've got how many boys?
5.
Five. Are they all out grid? Or are some of them a little more in grid than others, a little more
Oh,
down
no,
grid?
no, several of them are in grid.
Yeah, and so in and those of you who don't know David, I promise you, David is probably more naturally comfortable out grid. So, if he's got an opinion, he'll share it. I mean, that's what makes him a really fantastic consultant. He doesn't pull back any punches, but he's not out there in their face. David also is very diplomatic, I'm sure, unless they really push him the wrong way. Is that fair to say, David?
That's fair to say.
Now, did you had to learn to be diplomatic, or was that just came along with it, even though you
No,
were?
it was. I've always had I think, a high degree of emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
and hyper aware of the reaction that people are having to either the words that I'm saying or me in general. So I have a tendency to want to keep relationship tension low all the time to be able to focus on the task.
And so, as you have observed your boys growing up, have you had to encourage some of them to hold back a little bit, find a little bit of humility, chill out a little bit, and others where you need them to like step up, step out? Any insights to share?
I haven't really had, I mean, I would suppose with my oldest son, who is now desirous of being a professional disc golfer,
Mm-hmm.
um, he's been one who I've had to talk to kind of rein in from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
He's very outgoing and very self-confident, and he's got good street smarts. But then again, my youngest one is a total ingrid who, I've had to talk to about academic counseling issues and trying to get him to reach out and take action at
Mm-hmm.
times.
Mm-hmm.
So each one of them is a very unique individual.
Yeah, yeah. But what's great is that what you've just done is given us some real world practical insights into this idea that balance isn't just about holding back the powerful. It's also about getting the people that are more in-grid in our lingo to find the confidence, find the energy, find the intention, do something to kind of step towards balance instead of stepping away from the aggressive behaviors, if that makes sense. Yep.
Yep.
Now, certainly, similarly, we find that in our profession as being trainers and all that. I mean, do you guys remember the days when assertiveness training was all the rage? We didn't want anyone to be aggressive, but we were trying to get people to be assertive. Come on, contribute, step up, have an opinion. I
Yep.
mean, there was at least a handful of years, maybe the better part of the decade, where that was a very popular subject to bring forth. And yeah, okay, so that's temperance. Now, of course, our question is always, where does temperance live on the change grid? So I'll just put up a composite grid. So if someone is really living this life of balance, I mean, this one's kind of like a dead giveaway, isn't it? Um, let me see if I can read this for you. All right, let me read this paragraph for you guys. Temperance includes restraint from revenge by practicing nonviolence and forgiveness, restraint from arrogance by practicing humility and modesty, restraint from excesses such as extravagant luxury or splurging by practicing prudence, and restraint from rage or craving by practicing calmness and self-control. Temperance has been described as a virtue by religious thinkers, philosophers, and more recently, psychologists, particularly in the positive psychology movement. Um, so I think it's interesting to kind of look at that and kind of going, well, where is that really moving someone on the change grid? So do you guys want to give me the obvious answer? Where are we going to find temperance, moderation, balance, harmony?
Good.
It's all actually the center of the change grid.
Oh, is it? All right.
Yeah, leaning a bit down grid because there's a settledness to it. So if we go to the middle, of course, is a place of balance, top, bottom, you know, all the way around that. It really is in the center. So this is balance part. But remember that the center of the change grid is a place where you exist, but you're not involved. You're not interacting, you're not doing anything. So it's just this instant of total detachment where you can observe everything that's going around you, but you have no real connection to anything that's going on around you, etc. Now, the moment we introduce this action of temperance, so when it says things like exercising restraint against something, I have to step off that center. And to David's point, I'm probably going to step a little bit down grid where I'm just going to chill out a little bit. Or I might step a little bit in grid where I'm going to be a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more, have a little bit more humility, etc. Usually the excesses that they talk about needing to be tempered are found quite far out grid and quite far up grid. So to bring me into balance, I need to cultivate more of the down grid energy to balance off the up grid excesses. And if I'm too far out grid, I need to cultivate some of the characteristics found in grid in order to bring me in that direction. And ultimately, I should end up centered. But again, as I said last time around, when you're in the exact center of the change grid, you are as detached as a human being is capable of getting. And it's fleeting, but nevertheless, it is something that we can achieve through any Zen practice you want. So whether it's yoga, meditation, mindfulness, whatever is your thing, you can do that. So temperance is a virtue. Questions, comments about that? Now, I thought I'd saved that, so I had that. Is it here? Oh, chastity, there it is. We were using that. I think that right next to it, I can put temperance. Those of you who weren't here last week, you'll really need to listen to that recording to know what we're talking about when it comes to chastity. And see, it's not limited to sexual desires. Let's change that color a little bit. So that's also kind of a centered sort of a thing. All right, let's go on to the third of these heavenly virtues, and that is charity. So charity, it's an act of kindness. Let's see if I give you their actual definition. In Christian theology, charity is considered as one of the seven virtues, as is understood by Thomas Aquinas as the friendship of man for God, which unites us to God. Let's see if we can translate that into something more behavioral. An altruistic love, giving of oneself. Let's see, I'm just scanning all this so we don't need to drag you through that. The practice of charity brings us to an act towards ourselves and others out of love alone, precisely because each person has the dignity of being a beloved child of God. Charity is held to be the ultimate perfection of the human experience. Um, yeah. So it is about this idea about giving. The fruits of charity are joy, peace, and mercy. All right, so if we think about charity as being an action, generally this is where things having to do with volunteering or making contributions comes into play, helping those who are sick and afflicted and are suffering in one way or another to try to do all this. So it's bringing out the humanity in us to try to treat another person purely as the human they are. So all else is set aside. There are no racial issues, there are no cultural issues, there are no political issues. All of that gets set completely aside, and the only focus is a human helping another human. So let's look at that as being a bit of a continuum. There is a way that charity is actually beneficial for everyone involved. And there's another situation where charity becomes self-sacrifice to the point of the person providing the charity being left in need of charity as a result. You have any thoughts around that? I'll give you some specific examples if that might help. How many of you ever known somebody who was so busy making charitable contributions that they didn't have enough resources for their own needs? Or people who spend so much time volunteering and helping out others that their own life and households and families were being neglected. Have you guys encountered any of that, or can you envision any of that happening?
I can envision it, T, but I have to share that I don't think I've ever met anyone like that.
No, I've heard rumors of them. In fact, I have a very close friend whose mother is very much that way. And in her particular situation, she was raised to be a devout Catholic. A couple years ago, she lost her husband and ended up turning around and giving all of his insurance proceeds to the church. Um, Not long after, she gave all those proceeds to the church, but she then found out that there were debts that needed to be paid and household issues that needed to be taken care of, etc. And so now she's in a really, really tough kind of situation. So there are situations like that where people become so altruistic or so driven by this focus on others and care for others that they do it at the expense of their own well-being. Um, Now, when it comes to the kind of work that we do, I have to tell you, I don't often encounter anyone who's that far along. But if we were clinical psychologists, I would not be surprised to find out that part of our population may very well be dealing with those kinds of issues. And I certainly don't have the qualifications or the training necessary to even approach. Where does that all come from? How does that behavior um, evolve into one that becomes problematic? But I just wanted to put out there that we tend to look at these heavenly virtues as being inherently good things, but I'm not so easily swayed. I don't believe that the seven deadly sins are always evil. I don't believe that the seven heavenly virtues are always good. I think that there is a continuum at the very least, and at a certain point in time, what is a virtuous behavior can end up becoming a self-destructive sort of a behavior. For example, going back to temperance, can you imagine if you were so devoted to temperance that you would tolerate anything and everything that was happening all around you? And ultimately, some of that tolerance could actually come back to hurt you. Um, Thoughts about that? Or all right, then let me share with you one of my favorite movies. Um, have any of you ever seen Requiem for a Dream?
Nope.
Requiem for a Dream. Requiem for a Dream is a very, very interesting movie, very thought-provoking. It's up there with, I don't know if you remember the movie Memento. Memento is a movie about someone who has short-term memory loss and can't figure out how they are, where they are, and they have to, and the entire movie is told backwards. So as they keep moving backwards and backwards and backwards, you finally get to a point where every time you think you know what's going on, in the next scene you find out that you're wrong. And so it's very, very fascinating. Well, one night I had a marathon of watching Memento and Requiem for a Dream. Requiem for a Dream tells the story of of a handful of people who all had very positive intentions, but because of different things that happened, they ended up going down the wrong path. And to say that the movie doesn't have a happy ending is an understatement. It has anything but a happy ending. But in one of the little scenes, there's this woman who just all she wants is, you know, a couple very simple little things. But she has a grandson, I think it is, might be a son, I think it's a grandson though, who has issues with drugs and he's involved with the wrong side of the law. And um, he is constantly taking things from her, and she's constantly forgiving him, accepting it, allowing him to continue. She has no sense of boundaries whatsoever. And without spoiling the movie, ultimately it is her lack of boundaries that ends up creating her demise. Um, and so this is what I'm talking about when it comes to temperance or charity. If you are going to be so tolerant of things and so giving of things that ultimately there's not much of you left, well, that could be a problem. Now, the author and illustrator Shel Silverstein wrote a book about this. Any of you know the book I'm talking about? It's a kid's book, so they say. I think it's really for adults, called The Giving Tree. Very famous book, The Giving Tree, all about this tree. And this tree has this boy that comes and visits the tree every day. And the boy keeps wanting things and wanting things. And so he wanted some apples. And so the tree says, take my apples. And he needed a boat. And so they said, well, cut down my trunk. Well, by the time the whole book is over, the tree is nothing but a stump. And the tree says, I've given you everything I have to give you. I have nothing left. I'm just an old an old trunk. And the kid says, well, by now he's very old, and he says, well, all I need is a place to sit. And the tree says, well, a stump really is a good place to sit, so come, boy, come and have a seat. And this book is celebrated like some wonderful act of caring and sacrifice and charity. And meanwhile, I'm reading the book from the time I was a little kid. I'm reading the book, and all I can think of is stupid tree. It's like, what's this tree doing? Tree, have some boundaries, have some rules, have some guidelines. Otherwise, you're going to end up being abused, and you're going to end up, becoming the victim of your good intentions, if you will. So I think it's very important as we look at these virtues to realize where it sits. So if I said, okay, charity, like chastity and temperance, probably exists close to the middle of the change grid, but now we're going to lean another direction. So what do you think? Charity, is it going to be middle, but leaning up grid, out grid, down grid, or in grid? Any thoughts? So charity is about giving, not self-sacrifice, but giving, sharing, caring about others. So the moment we start talking about things in those terms, we know that we're leaning slightly in grid. And so that's where that one would be. Now, it becomes a problem if it continues to move further and further and further in grid. So I keep giving away all of my ability. I give away my resources. I give away my energy. I give away my best thoughts and intentions and hopes for the world. And little by little, my ability is being stripped way, way back. And so I'm only able to handle challenges of a increasingly lower and lower level. So that's going to move me into this in-grid section and ultimately into the in-grid danger zone where there's none of me left. Um, you also see this if we've got someone who's in the outgrid danger zone, they tend to be the bully. A bully can only be a bully if there's someone for them to bully. And so that means there has to be someone who is relinquishing their own control and giving that control to the perpetrator so that the perpetrator can then use that enhanced power to take even more power away from that victim. And so as the person in the outgrid danger zone is gaining greater and greater and greater levels of power, the people that they're taking the power from are moving further and further and further in grid, perhaps even down grid, depending on how the manipulation is actually occurring. Could be upgrade as well, but generally it's more in grid and down grid is where the outgrid perpetrator is harvesting their usurped power from. Yep. Okay. Thoughts, comments? No. So you can put charity in the middle as well. Let's take a look at diligence. And now things are going to change a little bit with this one. I'll be very curious to know. Um, so how would you guys define diligence the way that we use it in modern terms? So
Uh,
David, Denise, what's
high
diligence?
levels of engagement and intention,
Hmm, hmm.
persistence. Uh, yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, so I'll read for you what their little definition is. It's pretty much just going to reinforce what David just said. Diligence is persistent effort of work. It also talks about there's a certain level of carefulness and consideration around the work. So it isn't just doing and doing and doing. Diligence is also involves an element of responsibility for how the work is being done, how the resources are being. So you're not only doing the work, you're being very conscientious and thoughtful around the work that's being done. So it is the hallmark of a strong work ethic, and that is that the belief that the work in and of itself is good. And so we're doing the work not because of a particular outcome, other than the fact that the work itself is a good thing. So just being actively working on something is better than doing nothing. Um, so let's see, I don't know who Bernard is, but he and others in research suggest that diligence in students, so he's an academic, is defined as the effort they put towards balanced and holistic development in mental, physical, social, and spiritual dimensions. So it correlates with academic performance, especially with younger students, and that the support of parents and educators encourages students to be diligent. Motivation, discipline, concentration, responsibility, and devotedness also come into play on there. But that's it. It's about putting forth thoughtful effort to do the work for the goodness of the work's sake itself. So if I said, all right, well, where on the change grid would you put diligence? Now, for
Uh,
me, it doesn't land in the middle.
no, I'd say that's more of an outgrid behavior.
An outgrid behavior. Now, maybe it's not out here in the danger zone, but I think it could be everywhere between the center of the change grid and out there. So isn't that interesting that first we say, oh, the virtues are these centered sorts of things about acceptance and charity and balance and temperance and whatever else we have going on, control. But boy, now it's time to say, well, what's the phrase from church? Uh, idle hands are the devil's playground or something?
Workshop.
Workshop, there you go. And so there's a, if anything, being idle is the sinful behavior, being diligent, being purposeful. So all that's living out grid. So I kind of like that because a lot of times in the work that we're doing as consultants and trainers, um, they tend to frame this outgrid energy as being uniquely capitalistic, that people that are in societies such as our own are far more focused on being rather being human doings instead of just human beings. Gotta get out there, do, accomplish and grow. That's all very outgrid in its energy. Um, and a lot of other cultures and that are just really focusing on cultivating those things we find in the center. This is the first of the virtues that seems to put some sort of value on the fact that we need to get out there and do some things. We need to do the right things the right way, the right time, but we need to be active. We need to go out there and do things. Now, what's driving that? Maybe that's where we get into some problems, because looking back at the seven deadly sins, if the reason why we're doing is because it's leading to support our greed behavior, well, okay, now we've crossed the line. Literally, we've crossed the line. It's right there, vertical. There's a line. We crossed it. Um, but in between here and that outgrade danger zone, all good things are happening. And if we look at the engagement rings, you see why. Let me bring up that layer. That's where people have got strong intentions. They're actively doing those things necessary, a certain engagement. There's a certain level of execution without killing anything. So I think that that's definitely shifting slightly out grid. All right. Other thoughts about diligence? No?
Important.
I think it's very important. In fact, today I was working out with my trainer, and my trainer, he's done more for me in the little bit more than a year that I've been working out with him than any of the other trainers I've ever had, and any of all of my many years of working out and thinking I knew what I was doing and making some good gains and all that sort of stuff. I'll tell you that um, if I had been working out with this trainer, wow, where I could be right now. So every week goes by and I learn something from him and about him. Now, all that said, I'll also tell you that he is in many ways similar to all of the bodybuilders I've ever met. He's very quiet. He's not arrogant in any way. And if he tells you he had the history about how he got involved in weightlifting and weight training and all that, there was an insecurity that kind of initially compelled him to start to work on himself and all that sort of a thing. So there is this humility, there is this whatever. And so while I'm learning a great deal from him, as far as my health and my fitness level, my appearance goes, I'm also doing my best to help him better own other aspects of himself. So, for example, I'm always looking for things that I can point out to him that I learned from him. That is something that he really could share with others. I mean, he'd be great if he had his own YouTube channel. So I'm doing my best to try to help him find a larger audience, because he really is that good. Well, one of the things that I learned from him is that consistency is what it's all about. And I know David is also a weight trainer and all that. So, I'm talking, he's talking about consistent. He says, look, it really doesn't matter what you do. If you're consistent doing it, it will lead to a predictable outcome. And so he said, so if you eat garbage and you eat it consistently, you're going to end up garbage. And if you overeat every single day, you do it consistently, you're going to end up overweight. But if you're more thoughtful about your diet, you monitor what you're eating a bit more, you exercise a bit more, whether that exercise is just going for a walk or a full out weight training session, because if you do it consistently, it will always lead to whatever the outcome happens to be. And I know that for certain. David, I know you know that for certain. It really is about consistency. And so I think that's an element of diligence that is really important in the work that we do, because all right, we do sales training. Well, what is it going to take for a sales representative to actually be successful? They got to be consistent. They got to be disciplined. They have to be diligent in doing the work that needs to be done. And at the beginning of things, making cold calls or doing whatever prospecting work that you're doing, you just do it because the work itself is inherently good, not because of any, down the road kind of a thing, but just saying like, no, just get comfortable doing these things, do it diligently, do it consistently, and good things will come from that. Thoughts about that? David, did I describe your any part of your reality?
Yeah, except, since last March, I mean, I went for 8 years, at least 3 to 5 times a week. And for probably 3 years, I went 7 days a week.
Yep.
And I got up at 3:15 in the morning and hit the gym by 4:30 so that I was ready by 8 o'clock to take on my day.
Yep.
I have to tell you, since the pandemic, I have not been back to the gym.
Well, and isn't that interesting? So even the act of consistently going to the gym led to a predictable result.
Yeah.
Consistently not going to the gym has led to whatever result it led to,
And I've lost 20 pounds.
which is good because what that meant was, well, and I'll just throw out there because it's again something we've been talking about. Not everybody. In fact, when the epidemic first started, people said that you're going to leave this or walk out of this epidemic as either a chunk, a hunk, or a drunk. And not everybody ended up gaining weight. Some people were able to suddenly now eat at home more, eat better because they were eating at home. They were doing whatever their routine was at home. And so they were better at it. Was that your case, David? You were just,
T, I'm just not hungry.
all right then.
I have to tell you, not going to the gym, I mean, I used to eat 2 solid meals a day and I was starved when it came time to eat. And now I may have a protein shake at about 2 o'clock after we're done, and I might have a bite later on. But if I consume 1,000 calories a day, that's a lot.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well then, you do that consistently, what's going to happen?
Lose 20 pounds.
Yeah, and David will slowly but surely disappear from our sight.
But the funny thing is the weightlifting left my frame intact. So
Yes.
I still look the same. I bet if I got back to the gym, it would take me 2 months
Yep,
to get back to where I was. So
absolutely.
that 8 years of diligence did pay off.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's amazing how fast muscle returns, size returns, all that sort of stuff returns. For me, the big challenge was when everything got shut down, I lost my flexibility. And being involved in weight training and being flexible don't usually go together. Usually weight training costs you flexibility. So you have to work really hard to stay flexible. And so I was taking all these yoga classes. Well, now my issue is I got to get my flexibility back. So yeah, but again, it's all about consistency. To me, that's part of diligence. All right, let's do another one. Let's talk for a moment about patience. We don't need to read their definition because pretty much it's what we all understand patience to be. So if I said, where on the change grid would you say people are least likely to be patient?
Upgrade.
Upgrade, not very patient. Because whatever that's going on that's making you feel impatient, it's making you feel increasingly out of control, out of control. I was watching a little video a couple of days ago. I don't know where I got it from. It was on Facebook somewhere. Maybe you guys have seen it. But there's this mama bear and there's this road and she's got four little cubs and she's just trying to cross the road and there's all these cars backed up because every time mama bear goes and gets one of the baby bears and goes across, another one will follow her across. Then she goes back to get one, and the one that was on the right side now is coming back the other way. It's hysterical to watch this video and just go, I'm watching amazing patience. The drivers are being very patient while they're waiting for this mama bear to do what she needs to. And of course, they're little cubs, they're adorable little things, the way they bounce around and all that. So, and mama bear is being very patient. What's that, David?
I saw that video.
Yeah, isn't it? It's good. It's really just like,
You
oh
got that
my,
last little bear climbing the tree, and Mama's on the other side of the road, and the cars are just cemented.
yeah, just sit there waiting because obviously, you be the driver, don't get out of the car. Mama bear doesn't like that.
Right.
So, so what are you going to do? You're not going to run over a little bear. So, but I thought like, okay, how would I feel in that situation? Well, if I was one of the cars that I could see what's going on, I might be going like, this is just the cutest thing. Get the camera. But if I'm one of those cars that are backed up now 15, 20 cars down the thing, I don't know what's going on. I can feel myself going up grid and getting very impatient with
Yeah.
what's going on. Yep. So definitely impatience can be found up grid. Now, where else on the change grid might we find impatience?
Well, outgrid.
Out,
Off-grid.
out grid. Now, the out grid impatience is different than up grid. So up grid, I'm feeling out of control, for reasons I've just described. How might out grid impatience feel different?
You're just running over things. You're not taking time to assess or look at the impact. You just
Yeah.
keep going and going and going.
Exactly. And so we know that the people that are in the outgrid area, and particularly the outgrid danger zone, are extremely task focused, extremely outcome focused. So blinders are on. How they get there, that's not what the focus is. Who they trample over, that's not the focus. Getting to that outcome is the focus. So if anything, they're becoming impatient with anybody and anything that's in their way. And so they're just going to barrel right on through. Well, that's more of an impatience of, you're seizing control instead of feeling out of control. And you're not waiting to seize control for it to be convenient to others.
See, I
So,
would say
yep.
upgrid is fighting and outgrid is struggling.
Ooh, tell us about that.
Well, when you're upgrid, you don't perceive a lot of ability, and the challenge is extremely high. So you're fighting for control. And
Yeah.
when you're outgrid, the ability and challenge are equally high. So you're struggling with what to do.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's probably how it expresses itself. If I think about some of the clients, and I know we've all had clients that are extremely far out grid and nothing is happening fast enough to satisfy them. And they're getting upset with people and limitations and all that's going on. That is kind of a bit of a struggle because on the one hand, they're ready to move forward, but something or somebody is holding them back. In fact, can you imagine if you were a business owner and you were desperately awaiting your shipment, your cargo to arrive, and meanwhile there's a big tanker freighter blocking the Suez Canal? Imagine what would be happening to your level of patience, your level of tension. So I can see how at a certain point in time, you'd be pushing, 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 trying to go as far out grid as possible. But then when you realize that no matter how angry you get and how frustrated you become, you can't move that ship. So then you're going to go upgrade all of a sudden and have all that going on. So definitely upgrid and outgrid are tests of one's patience for different dramatic settings, but nevertheless, that's where it is. Um, Now, what about the person who's very far down grid? Would you describe being that far down grid as patient or impatient?
Unconscious.
Unconscious for sure. And so I don't think if I'm going to be um, impatient about something, it is a consistent state. More like something has come to my attention and there's a little bit of impatience that's going to come into play. I've got a specific sample in mind, but I'll just kind of wait and see if you guys want to throw anything else in there. So Denise, Edie, anything you want to throw in about downgrid, how they might be impatient? All right, I'll give you my example. Um, I know that one of my big challenges when it comes to communication skills and relationships and all that sort of thing, being on a team, anything like that at all, even when I had like a regular job long, long, long ago, um, I absolutely hate having to explain something twice. I hate having to go over stuff that we've gone over before. So I'm downgrade about the whole thing. It's like I already have all this information. There's no challenge in it. Why are we still talking about this? Why are we revisiting this? Why? Didn't we already talk about this? Didn't we already make a decision? So that to me is kind of like that impatient. I'm not really impatient about the situation as much as I'm impatient with just this thought like, oh my gosh, do I really even have to think about this again? I don't even want to. So I don't know what other word to describe that, but what it comes out as is this frustration and this impatience with others who, for whatever reason, missed something that we went over, or needs to be reviewed, etc. So is it just me, or does anybody else on the call ever kind of go like, really, we got to talk about this again? So it is just me. Pass me a pill. Anyway, so that's the impatience I thought. Yeah,
The area of I do like to talk things over again, and many times it's because it either feels unresolved or um, my memory hasn't remembered exactly right, or I want to confirm.
hmm And so when you're in that mode, obviously you're not down here, you're more exploring. That's more of a being in power sort of a thing, trying to find the information, get the understanding, look at the options, etc. So that's very much associated with that. But if the other person you're talking to is down here, you can kind of imagine how they would get impatient with this probing, and meanwhile, you noticing that they're impatient with your probing is probably moving your level of tension further upgrid.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of, so it's this impatient, but it's really more of a low level. When I think about being impatient, I think about someone looking at their watch and tapping their toe and just going like, come on, come on, come on, come on. That to me is upgrade impatience. And then the outgrade impatience is more like, well, come on, people, let's get our act together. Let's, what's going on? What's going on? So more David was talking about with the struggle that people are having, where this downgrade impatience is actually coming kind of from a place of you're disturbing the hibernating bear's slumber. So the person who's this far down grid has already heard it, figured it out, made a decision, put the whole thing, oh, this metaphor will work, put the whole thing to bed. And now someone's coming along and not poking the bear to upset it, but poking the bear with questions, which in turns upsets it, mostly because the bear just wants to go back to sleep. The bear just wants to go back to sleep. Um, okay, so there could be some impatience that we encounter downgrid as well, less often and less powerfully expressed than the impatience upgrid and outgrid. How about impatience ingrid? Do you think an ingrid person becomes impatient? What do you guys think?
I don't think so.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think of an example where they would be, if they are feeling impatient, I would be shocked if they were to ever even begin to express it.
Right.
Um, we do find some passive aggressive behavior quite far in grid. Um, so if there is any sort of impatience, I think it's silent. I don't think it's not verbalized, it's not expressed in an observable kind of way. Um, but I do know they're also not patient. They may be subservient. They may be super tolerant. They may be super accepting, but I don't even think the things I've just given you as words are things they're doing consciously or intentionally. I think that energy of being that far out in grid is to simply um, go with the flow, stay under the radar, don't call any attention to yourself whatsoever. don't be noticed, disappear into the background. And so is it tolerance? Is it whatever? Is it acceptance? Is it just deferring? I mean, what do you call the ultimate victim where they're left? A shell of a person kind of a thing? So anyway, could there be impatience there? I guess. Is there patience there? No, to me, patience would be something that requires a bit more energy than that. So I say all this as I go around just to say that patience probably exists in the center of the change grid towards the in-grid side of things. So I think there's a little bit of an amiable energy that needs to be present for someone to be patient. And I can even think in the language we might use with an impatient client. We might say to them, well, relax a little bit. That's a downgrade thing. Give people a bit of a chance. They're doing the best they can. That's a bit of an in-grid awareness kind of a talk. Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. You guys agree with me? Disagree with me? Patience,
No,
mid-grid towards in-grid. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
that sounds good.
All right, good. Well, that leaves us with two, and that would be kindness and humility. And so what I think I'd like to do is save those two for Thursday's call so we can get those two covered, and then we can put this all together in terms of how do you use these seven deadly sins and seven heavenly virtues in a coaching or consulting relationship. Is it something that you might actively share with the client? Is it something you're just going to be aware of and factor in? How do you use these virtues and sins as anchor points for understanding and for moving people to someplace else that might be more beneficial to them on the change grid? So with that, any questions, comments, thoughts?
No, that was really interesting.
Good. All right, well, great then. So we'll talk to everybody on Thursday. So thanks, everybody. Bye for now.